Auzubillahi minash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. And welcome to this live session regarding effective academic writing. My name is Yasmin Toor, and I will be conducting this session with you today, inshallah. Can you please let me know if the sound is coming through okay in the live chat, so we can, inshallah, proceed with the session. Can you let me know if the sound is okay? Okay, mashallah, mashallah. The responses are coming in. The sound is okay. So once again, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to everyone, and jazakallah khairan for joining in. So without further ado, we get to the session, which is about effective academic writing or effective essay writing. As you all know that the assignment session and the assignment season is on peak, and upon the request of all you lovely people, I'm here today, and we will walk through the purpose and the process of academic writing, also how you can improve wherever you are, whether you're a beginner or you're an intermediate or you're a professional. There's always room for improvement and there's always room for learning. So we will walk through the do's and the don'ts and how academic writing is essentially different from other kinds of informal writing, as well as lots of other stuff. And also at the end of the session, there will be a Q&A, and I'll take any kinds of questions and confusions you might have, inshallah. So let's move on to the first slide. We would like to talk about the purpose of an academic essay, which also includes your assignments, your research articles, your research papers, which you are supposed to submit being a student or being a researcher. So you can see that the word essay is derived from a Latin verb, which means to examine, to test, or to drive out. And given this definition, the purpose of an academic essay is to discover knowledge, to make a point, to persuade the reader, to share information, truthful, authentic information, I must add, to synthesize information that wasn't there in the first place, or to arrange information that has not been arranged previously, to analyze a given topic, and to document observations. And also, sometimes your essay might cover one, not only one, but two, or even more than two, or even all of the above purposes. So your academic essay might also be multi-purpose. So these are the basic points that define the purpose of an academic essay. And we will move on to the next slide. So when you write an academic essay, you have to analyze the process. You have to, you know, gather your ideas and read and research. You have to define your topic. Sometimes you're already given an assignment or a topic to write on. So the process of defining and devising and making an actual topic that really makes sense is already done for you. So this is an easy part. But sometimes when you are a researcher, when you decide to write something by yourself, to conduct research by yourself, or simply write an academic account of a pressing issue or a pressing topic or current affairs, you have to read and research to, structure your mind to make up really a topic that makes sense, that has a couple of keywords that the readers can understand and relate to. So this is a whole step-by-step process which leads to effective writing. So you have to read and research, because as long as you do not clearly understand the ideas, the data, the information, and the knowledge that you are going to write about, you will not be able to convince the reader that your information is actually worth something. So the writer himself or the writer herself has to be first and foremost he or she has to be very clear and very knowledgeable and very organized within their own head about what they're going to write. Because if your ideas, if your information, and if your background knowledge about the certain topic that you are going to write about is all over the place within your mind, the organization and the arrangement and the presentation on paper is going to be affected. So it is really, really important that you read and research and brainstorm ideas. And all that reading, researching, and getting your mind into order will lead you to develop a working outline. So let's suppose, for example, if we're talking about an assignment, you've already been given a topic. Let's say you've been given a topic to write on the importance of the authentication of narrations. So you have to inform yourself, first of all, what narrations are, what conditions make a narration authentic, what scholars have said, what scholars have written about. And then when you have analyzed the necessary information and the necessary work that has been done, you are in a position to develop an outline step by step, starting with the introduction, then going on to review the existing literature, defining the aims and objectives of your writing, then going on to the methodology, then recording your results and your observations or your opinions. Sometimes you might be asked about your opinion. So you can also include that, and then you come to a conclusion. So writing doesn't come overnight. So all the great writers, they didn't just sit down and produce a magnificent work of knowledge. They have written hundreds and thousands of drafts that never see the light of the day. So never think that you cannot become a good writer if you aren't one already. You have to practice, you have to develop your drafts, you review them for content, you revise them again and again, you review them for grammar and errors, mechanics, technicalities, then you revise it again and again. You can also show it to other people within your circle whom you think that they are better writers or they are more critical in terms of analysis of text, and you can revise it again and again. And this continuous circle of reviewing and revising will result in the production of a very magnificent piece of writing, which is, of course, the result of hard work and not giving up. So everyone can be a good writer, and everyone's assignments and research articles or review papers can be amazing. So if we talk about the assignments, you already have your topic, as I mentioned before, because the step of getting ideas and actually organizing them into a topic that you can write about, that's already done for you. But what if you have to develop those topics yourself? What do you do? Where do you get the ideas? How do you know what situation or what current affair or what issue has to be written about? So you have to develop your interest, keep up with current situations, and find things that you are passionate about. Because when the passion of a writer gets mixed into his writing, it reflects excellence. Writing without passion, it simply lacks the flavor. So it is always the best to write about things that you are really attached to, or you are really passionate about, or you feel for, or you have sympathy for certain topics. They could be of the social sciences or political sciences, Islamic sciences, areas that you think in your locality, issues that should be given a voice and issues that should be written about. So when you try to develop an area of interest, you read texts which are related to that area of interest of yours. And then you can define what you actually want to write about, what situation, what pressing affair you want to put on paper. And then you use various brainstorming techniques. You can list the ideas on a piece of paper. Many people do that. Many writers do that. They list ideas, make bullet points, and then they organize them, reorganize them. And you might come up with a couple of ideas which you wouldn't like afterwards. You can cut a couple of them off, you can add something else, and ultimately you will end up with a list of things that will become the content of what you are actually writing. And then you can also use the clustering or mind mapping techniques, on which you just put keywords on a piece of paper haphazardly and you connect the dots, and ultimately you get an idea of what your topic is going to look like. Then you also have an option of free writing. So free writing is kind of a gamble, but many writers do it. They just start to write, and they might start with the review of literature, or they might skip to the conclusion, and you just keep on writing as your ideas come. You could be writing a couple of things within your introduction, 1 minute, and then something could just come into your mind and you skip to recommendations. So you go jumping back and forth in between sections of your essay or sections of your assignment, and ultimately you complete them. So people who like to be very organized should preferably use the first technique of listing your ideas one by one, which also will ultimately lead into developing an outline. And then you can go from there. If you're more flexible, if you're not really a perfectionist, or if you're not really really obsessive with the way your work should be done, you can use free writing or mind mapping, whatever it is you feel comfortable with. You can also mix up your techniques and combine two or even all the three approaches. This is something that you do within your own mind. But sometimes it really helps to discuss the issue with others. Ask people who are around you, who you think that might be affected by the pressing issue, or if you're giving a certain assignment topic and you know a couple of people that you know have expertise, talk with them, exchange ideas, listen to what others have to say, and instill their ideas with your own voice in your writing. But if you take the research of others, always be careful to give them credit, properly mention where you got your sources from, properly reference your material. And discussing the issue with others is always a helpful matter. You can also, if you are a student and you've been given an assignment, you can discuss the issue with other fellow students or students who you think they are better equipped to address the given topic, and you can exchange ideas and ask them what approach they're using. You might adapt the same approach that they have. You can also design your own approach. And it's always important, like I said before, to research the topic, extensive research. The internet is full of material, but it's also very important to be able to identify authentic from inauthentic material. So you have to always be careful when researching your topic. So you look at clustering in a little more detail. You write your main point in the center of the page, you circle it, and as the ideas come to you, you branch off from the main point. So it's much like a tree. So each idea branches off from a previous idea, and you get a whole network of ideas and interlinked keywords, and that will ultimately give you a better picture of what your outline is going to look like and how your piece of writing is going to be structured. So the next important step after all these preliminary steps, after preparing yourself and analyzing what you want to write about, gathering enough information, researching your topic to an extent that you completely understand all the aspects that you want to cover, it is now time to develop an outline. So once you establish your statement or a thesis, you use it to help you develop an outline of your paper or your essay or your assignment, even if you're not required to include the outline in your assignment. It's always good to have an outline on a rough sheet because it helps you organize your ideas to stay on track. Because many a times we start writing, and once we get into the flow of writing, we tend to wander off the path. We tend to, we just go off track. We lose focus on what we want to discuss. So looking back at a developed outline will always help you to stay focused and avoid the inclusion of unnecessary material. It will also avoid you from getting sidetracked, and it will always save you time. So for every main point within your outline, you will always need supporting details. So you can write about something, you can express your opinion, and you can record your observation, but you have to always present substantial evidence to back up your statement or to back up your ideas or your main points. So after developing the outline, you now get to write the first draft or the rough draft. So you have a statement, you have an outline, and then you can begin to write your rough draft. While you are writing the rough draft, there are a couple of things that you should keep in mind to make the process easier and hassle-free and to prevent yourself from getting distracted. So it's always good to organize the information in paragraphs. A good academic essay or a good assignment or a good paper always grabs the attention of the reader right from the start in the introduction. And the introduction must always be written in a way that even if your average reader does not have the necessary information related to the issue you have written about, the introduction should give him enough background details that he feels comfortable enough to keep on reading. So it could be that you're writing a piece on certain political issue, and someone in your audience, in your target audience, might not be of a very political background. So how do you make sure that the reader knows what you're talking about? So within your topic, there are always 2 or 3 or even more main terms or keywords, as we call them. So in your introduction, you always have to define and relate all the keywords with each other so that someone with zero background knowledge gets enough information from your introduction. And the introduction should be captivating enough that the reader gets hooked. And even though he doesn't have a background information or even interest in what he's reading, he or she should get hooked so that they keep on reading. Your language should also be different from informal writing. So if you're writing a letter or you are writing a article for a magazine or for a website, those articles significantly differ from an academic article or an academic assignment in terms of language, sentence structure, the use of pronouns, and the general use of vocabulary. So you have to keep your paper really coherent with transition words and sentences so that the language is strong informal, sorry, not informal, but formal, and really reflects a level of expertise and professionalism. As you go from the introduction through your review, your methodology, your actual discussion, and your results, it is always very important to wrap up your assignment or your paper with a really strong closing paragraph or concluding remarks. You can also give it the heading of summary or conclusion. You also have to utilize academic writing conventions and follow the writing process. So you have to know what differentiates an academic article or an academic assignment from an informal one. You have to avoid using slang, conventional language, and abbreviations. You have to avoid talking in the first person pronoun or generally like. There are many assignments, many students, as an example, they, while expressing their opinions, write that I think that this should be like that. And, you know, the personal touch is not a part of what an academic writing should be. You have to drop the personal touch. It should be really formal. So you do not use personal pronouns. You rather keep it general. And you have to follow the protocols of academic writing. So we will look at the introductions in more detail. The purpose of the introduction, like I mentioned before, is to hook the reader, contextualize your argument or topic, and also provide necessary background information about the topic. So we have gone through this in rather detail, so we will move on to the next slide. Okay, so strategies to hook the reader. As we said, that the introduction should be strong enough and interesting enough that the reader wants to keep on reading. So how do you actually make the introduction worthwhile? You can start your introduction by asking a question, which will instantly grab the attention of the reader. You can tell a story if it relates to your topic. Maybe if you're discussing about the current affairs or an alarming situation in society, you can tell a story about someone or a victim or something that grabs the attention of the reader instantly. You can also use a quote. You can provide interesting statistics. You can share an anecdote, and you can also make a provocative statement that will make the reader want to read on. You also need to give context. You have to try to put yourself into your reader's shoes and analyze what the reader actually needs to know to understand. You have to explain basic stuff and terminologies to the reader, all the while avoiding unnecessary details that would maybe sidetrack the reader or make your introduction seem too overflowing with information. So you can provide historical background, issues relating to the topic, important authors and texts that you will be referring to, cultural issues, and why the topic is important or relevant, why you chose to write on it, what the aims of your assignment or your essay is, what the objectives is, what kind of research questions you are going to address, what kind of issues you're going to tackle. That should all come under the context in your introduction. So how do you actually structure your paragraph? You start your body paragraphs with clear topic sentences. A topic sentence has a couple of characteristics which are listed here. It comes at the beginning of a paragraph. It always presents the most important point that you want to make in that paragraph. And it is always specific. It's not so broad that it would require a full essay to explore. So your paragraph should be, you should talk about one pressing detail in one paragraph. And once you're over with that and you start a new paragraph, that new paragraph should not go back to what was discussed before, but it should start with a new, clearly defined topic sentence, and you go on like that. So your assignment or your article has a distinct pattern and a clearly defined chronological order, discussing issues and facts and figures one by one after the other as they come according to your outline, not haphazardly. You don't go jumping back and forth, discussing halfway there, then going on to the next paragraph, and then you suddenly remember that something was missed and you jump to the last paragraph, which was not completely explained, and all your paragraphs end up being chunks of words and you're just talking about the same thing, and there's no order, there's no structure. And this kind of haphazardness within your body, within the body of your assignment, will reflect a poorly compiled academic piece. And if it is an assignment, it will result in the loss of grades. And if it is a paper that you publish or you want to publish, it will result in maybe rejection or strong reviews and criticism. You might have to, edit and rewrite huge chunks of your article again because of lack of that particular structure that should have been there in the first place. So it is really important that your paragraphs start with distinctly clear topic sentences, and that a certain paragraph only deals with the issue of that certain topic sentence and not with the previous one or with the one to come. You can always prepare the reader at the end of a certain paragraph for what's going to be coming next, but you do not want to jump between issues and explain them halfway in a certain paragraph and then halfway in another paragraph. So you confuse your reader and you confuse yourself while writing. So this is very important. So how do you actually support your topic sentence? How do you make it sound compelling? How do you substantiate your claim? What kinds of evidence can you provide? They can be facts, they can be examples, they can be anecdotes if your piece of writing has a tendency or it has a certain flexibility of being a little informal. It also depends upon what kind of issues you are addressing, what you're exactly writing about. It can also include the testimony of certain experts which have previously done research in the field that you are also talking about. You can add quotes, you can add observations. Those observations can be your own. It could be the observations of a certain professional in the field. You can add statistics. Once again, those statistics could be data that you have collected yourself, you have analyzed it yourself. It could also be records from public databases or any other secondary data that is easily available and is properly referenced. So once you have listed all your supporting points, you have to be sure to elaborate with concrete details. You have to explain what you mean. If there are certain terminologies or keywords that you feel the need to explain, that you think the common reader does not have knowledge about, or if there are certain points that need elaboration and explanation, or more than just a couple of sentences to substantiate your claims, then you have to give those details properly referenced from authentic sources within the paragraph after you have listed all your supporting points. So, how do you actually create coherence in your document? So, anyone can write together a string of sentences, ideas that come one after the other, facts and figures, one paragraph and the second paragraph, and then the third, and then the fourth. But a good piece of academic writing reflects continuity and harmony in between the different sections and subsections, in between the different paragraphs. So, how do you actually create that harmony, that coherence, that flow, that continuity? You use transitions. Those transitions can be simple words to bridge certain parts of a complex sentence. They can also be sentences to bridge complex ideas so that the reader doesn't get confused. So there are a couple of words that you can use to create coherence. Here, just a couple of examples of many. You can see them on the screen. First, second, in addition, nevertheless, in contrast to, furthermore, therefore, even though. There are so many, but they always have to have the proper use according to the English language. After you have gone through all the sections, you have written all your paragraphs with supporting points, you have structured, you have recorded your observations, you have added all the evidence that you need in case of your assignments, you have added sources from the Quran, sources from the Hadith, narrations, authentic references, you have properly given all the facts, all the substantiating knowledge that you need in order to justify what you're writing about or justify that the topic that you have been given. You are now at a point that you need to close and you need to conclude your piece of writing, and you actually have to write a conclusion, which can also be called a summary. So, strategies for a conclusion. Your conclusion generally is everything that you have already stated, but you have to, get together the best pieces and the most important bits of your statement and restate them in a different way. You have to make strong closing comments. You have to really convince the reader that the information you have presented and the claims you have made, the observations you provided, if you have provided the statistics, they are they can be in favor or against it. All depends on if you are trying to, talk in the positive direction of something. You can be in favor of something, or you can be against something. It's much like if you are conducting a scientific experiment, you can get results that are in line with the idea you presented, and you can also get results that completely contradict the idea you presented. So whatever your outcome is, whatever you deduce from your academic piece, whether it is in line with the claims you presented or it is against the claims you presented, you have to make a strong closing comment so that the conclusion really convinces the reader that whatever you have presented is in fact, useful and authentic knowledge and useful information. And you always need to leave the reader with a closing thought so that there are no confusions, there are no unanswered questions. Make sure that you have addressed all the issues that you promised to address in your introduction. Make sure that you did not leave anything open, and everything should be nicely bound together in your conclusion. Okay, so there are academic conventions like in the previous slides, we talked about that you have to take care of certain things when you are writing an academic piece or an assignment, and those are called academic conventions. So now we will go through them again. Couple of things I've already mentioned along the way, but we will go over them again nonetheless. So you avoid using personal pronouns like I, we, and you. And this is just the same thing that I previously explained, that academic writings do not have the personal touch of someone talking to you face to face or telling you everyday happenings. It's something professional, and it should sound as such. So you do not use personal pronouns like I, we, and you, or he, she, they said this, and this happened like that, and you try to be formal and you try to be professional. You also would not want to use contractions like isn't, there, wasn't. You should write out all the words in a proper way, like don't should be written out as do not, wasn't should be written out as was not. So there should be no abbreviations like it's everyday conversation. There should be, it should be proper. And a part of being proper is not using contractions like the couple of contractions and many more that are presented in the slide. You should also avoid slang, avoid personal tone, avoid vague or unclear ideas. And the most important part, also being a student, is to avoid plagiarism. So plagiarism is actually copying other people's content without mentioning the source or without giving them credit. So it's even worse than cheating. So you might come across a couple of professionals that have written about a certain topic that you have been given in your assignment. So you sit on your computer and you go through those facts and figures that somebody else presented, somebody else's research, and somebody else's conclusions, and you think that this is the material that I'm including to really back up my claim. So you take the findings of that person and add it to your assignment. But if you do it without mentioning where this information came from, what your actual source is, that's basically stealing that person's intellectual property. And this is called plagiarism. Plagiarism is a big no when it comes to academic writing. Research articles get rejected. Published papers can even get retracted if they are found to be plagiarized. Dissertations can be cancelled. People can be failed, and it is strongly advised to properly check that all the information you have provided, if it's not your own, you always have to reference and use materials by telling the reader that this bit of information has been taken from that person. So there are a couple of methods that you can use to cite your references and you quote your sources. You can use a couple of styles. You must have heard about them. There's the APA style, there's the Chicago Chicago, then there is MLA, there's Harvard, and each of these styles have a different set of rules on how you are supposed to credit people if you're writing and if you are taking information or knowledge from their writings. So most of the sciences and most of the universities that I have worked with and I'm still working with prefer the APA style, which is the American Psychological Association. It's they have a set of rules how to reference your material properly. If we have time, if it is convenient, I will also show you a couple of examples on screen. But for now, we will focus on completing this session. And if there are any questions regarding the citing of your sources in particular, you can ask those questions during the Q&A session at the end of this lecture. So talking about the academic conventions, we first went through all the things that you should avoid, strongly avoid. So now there are things that you should do and you are encouraged to do. You should always address both sides of an argument. If you're presenting an argument and there are a couple of people who are in favor or have information in favor of that argument, and there are a couple of people who have written about it and they are not in favor, it's always good to present all that information, all that contrasting statements to give the reader a clear review and a really structured, all-in-one source to read both sides of the argument. You must always cite your sources. You have to use a formal tone. You have to basically make strong statements and take a stand. Like, academic writings should not reflect weakness in vocabulary, weakness in sentence structure. You should use really convincing, binding, and concrete details. And you always have to give yourself proper time to develop your paper or your assignment. Time management is really crucial. It's half the battle. If you have an assignment or a deadline, you know that you have, let's suppose, say 2 months or 3 months. Give yourself enough time to read about the topic, do your research. Give yourself, let's suppose, 10 days to do all the background research and excuse me, give yourself enough time to compile all the background information and all the knowledge that you need. Let's say give yourself 10 days to do that. Give yourself, like, say, a month to develop the actual paper. Give yourself enough time that if you read through your first draft and you find that there are certain shortcomings or you might have gotten off track, that you have enough time before your deadline to actually go in, correct those details, add more substantiating information if you need to, or maybe rearrange sections that you think need rearranging. It is really important that you have a couple of days. I personally always recommend to have at least 10 days till your deadline to cope with any uncertainties that might come up during your assignments or your research or even your thesis and your dissertations. So it's always good to have that extra time to, cope with anything that might come up. It's always good. You also have to, take into account that your upload might be delayed, or there might be internet connectivity issues, or the server might be down, or there might be too many people uploading assignments and your browser might not be loading the website correctly, and all these things that you don't actually have control over. So it's really, really, really important that you give yourself enough time to actually organize your ideas, and enough time to put those ideas on paper, and then enough time to review and rewrite sections you need to, and enough time till the deadline to do any last minute touch-ups or any last minute changings. And then there is also the issue of plagiarism. So if you are uploading your assignment, you also get your plagiarism report and the percentage similarity. So if you have a couple of days, it's always good to, have those couple of days in case your plagiarism is more than what is allowed. Generally, anything below 20% is acceptable. More than 20% is really not recommended. Anything over 50% is straight away taken as copied and totally plagiarized, and that is not tolerable. So always, always, always try that your plagiarism is 20% or less than that. If it is more than that, you always have a second attempt to redo your assignment. And if you have that extra time, if you have managed your time efficiently, those extra days will give you enough space to actually work on the sections that need rewriting or rephrasing, and you can cope with those last minute hiccups that happen along the way. So it's always very important to remember that writing is a process. It doesn't come overnight. No great writer is born a great writer, and every writing assignment is a practice for the next one. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes a lot of reading, a lot of practice and expansion of vocabulary. I've met many people, many students who are really good with understanding something, but if it comes to putting those ideas and those concepts on paper, they struggle. They need to, work harder than they expected to. But never be disheartened. It is always good to have a positive outlook and take it as a opportunity to redo a paper or write it better the next time. If you are getting criticism from your teachers, your lecturers, your professors, those criticizing remarks, they're not to put you down, they're not to negatively affect your learning process, but they're actually to build you up, and you are to take them as such. You should go through every step of the process with a clear head, not hastily, really calm and cool, composed, and with a clear mind. Focus on your ideas first, and focus on grammar and spellings the last. There are many what do we say, there are many programs, many softwares that help with grammar. They help with sentence structure. There are many softwares that help with citing your resources. So make sure to use those online resources to minimize the work that you need to do manually, because when you have the option of getting something done automatically, that's always better. I always say that smart work is better than hard work. Hard work is essential, but if you can work smart, then that is an edge, and you should take that. You should always get feedback from a peer, from an instructor, from a tutor, from a professional in the field. Give them your writing, ask them for feedback, ask them for criticism, and be able to take the criticism with an open mind. If you have a small heart, or if someone says that your assignment isn't up to mark, or this piece of writing I didn't really enjoy it that much, do not take it as a setback. Take it as an opportunity to learn, to incorporate the feedback that you get. And this step-by-step process of growing will make you into a better writer, and it will equip you with the tools needed to be a really good writer. All good things take time, and so does writing. Okay, so now we have a brief contrast and a comparison of a research paper and an academic essay. So we shall briefly go to the small document that I have prepared for you. Okay, so what really is the difference between a research paper and an essay? So a research paper is actually researching and expressing other points of views on a topic, and you also incorporate your own insights and ideas. Whereas an essay is usually purely your own point of view. A research paper is long in length, at least 8 pages, whereas an essay is considerably shorter, with an average of maybe 5 paragraphs, 3 pages, maximum maybe 1,500 words, not more. Then a research paper usually requires comprehensive understanding of the topic, and you have to thoroughly research it. That also goes for your assignments, because your assignments are always research oriented. You are always required to substantiate your claims, and you cannot do that unless you have a comprehensive understanding of the topic you're going to write about. An essay doesn't necessarily require a comprehensive understanding. So you can just go with your point of view, your ideas, what you think about, your opinions, and etc., etc. A research paper usually requires familiarity with research writings associated with the chosen topic, whereas that's not the case with an essay. A research paper helps build the writer's knowledge of a topic, whereas an essay might help you build writing skills more than knowledge. In a research paper, the writer compares various pieces of information in a... Sorry for that. And when it comes to an essay, the writer usually his writing skills by presenting chosen piece. When it comes to a research paper, after researching the topic thoroughly, the writer usually compiles and evaluates the information, restructures and presents the topic from their point of view, and citations are incorporated, and analysis is backed up from compiled research by previous researchers. Whereas in case of an essay, sorry for the screen just suddenly went down. I hope that the screen is back on. Okay, sorry for the delay. In an essay, the writer usually puts the thoughts of his own mind on paper, and the thought is given to the purpose of the writing and what type of essay it actually is. The prospective audience is also considered, and the writing should be well organized, coherent, and supported by appropriate facts and examples. So this was a brief account of the main differences when it comes to a research paper or an essay. So now we have time for questions and answers. If there are any questions, anything that you might have confusions about, any queries, anything related to today's slides or the content, is anything that's not really being clear to you. And if there are any confusions, now is the time to type in your questions in the live chat box, and I will be reading those questions one by one and try to answer all questions to the best of my ability, inshallah. So if there are any questions, please go ahead and type into the live chat box. Are there any questions? Please type your questions into the chat box, the live chat box. If there are any particular questions related to the kind of assignments you get, the kind of topics you're given, you might ask those as well. Or if anyone is working on their dissertation or a research proposal, anything related to research in general, you might ask those kind of questions as well. Just simply type it in the chat box. I can read them from there and answer your questions, inshallah. Okay, I will now show you regarding the APA style of referencing. So I will just put out a sample paper. So most of the time in your assignments, you are instructed to properly reference your resources, right? Properly use citations and create reference lists or bibliographies. So reference lists or bibliographies are actually a list of all the sources you consulted. If you're talking about a bibliography, that is a list of all the books or articles or papers or essays or databases or journals you consulted while writing your essay or your assignment or your paper, and they're listed alphabetically one by one. So if somebody actually wants to go back to a certain article that you cited and know more, they can go to your bibliography, to the list, and get that information from there and do further readings. So a bibliography is more general than a reference list, in a sense that everything that is in your bibliography must not be necessarily cited within the text of your academic writing as well. So it is possible that you have consulted a couple of books, but you did not actually take anything in particular or anything as it is from that book. So you have just read through it, you have just consulted it, and you got a sense of your topic from there. But in the end, you ended up writing it in your own words, giving it your own observations and your own facts and figures. So you did not exactly take something from them. So those kinds of sources come under the bibliography, right? So you do not exactly have to cite them within your text. But when it comes to certain particular observations, facts, figures, findings, results, and previous research from other people, you are actually required to exactly cite your source as you go. So you have those citations within your text of your paper or your essay. And then you also have a complete list of all those in-text references at the end in your reference list. So when we talked about referencing your resources and avoiding plagiarism, that basically was what I was trying to make you understand. So if you are required to, make a bibliography, then that is something more general. It has more flexibility. And in most of your assignments, the word bibliography might be mentioned, like create a bibliography at the end. Bibliography actually comes from bibliothek, which means library or something. So library is just a place where you can go and search up books, and so your bibliography is just a list where your reader can go and look at the sources that you consulted and maybe go back to the original book and read through it, get more information, get more understanding of the topic, right? But as you advance through your degree or your career or as a researcher in general, you have to produce more academically correct pieces of writing, and then you have to give a reference list at the end. So let's suppose it's the same, much the same with the verses of the Quran and Hadith, that when you quote a verse, after you're done quoting, you instantly mention the verse and the chapter within the bracket, right? Right after your verse is finished, to let the reader know that this is not something you said, but this is something that it is said in the Quran. And within the text, you actually tell the reader that this is the chapter and this is the verse, so that if the reader wants to verify your information, he can actually go back to the source, write to the source, open that chapter, look at the verse, and reconfirm that what you have included in your paper or your essay or your assignment is correct. So that is, much of the referencing is basically the same. So if you have, let's say, cited a certain researcher, like this researcher in this year of publishing said this, so you actually are citing that researcher within the text. And if somebody reading your article or your assignment wants to actually verify if that information actually came from the source that you are claiming it came from, they can go back to the reference list where you will have a complete detail of the author, the name of his publication, the year of his publication, the publisher that published it, or the journal that it was published in. And the complete information can be got from there. So that is meant by citing your resources. Okay, questions are coming in now. Somebody, Avion Resource Link asked if they can get a copy of the lecture. I suppose the admin can answer that better, but I think that the lecture is being recorded and the recording link will be shared on later, hopefully. So yes, in that case, you can get a copy of the lecture. So there are a couple of questions from the admin themselves. Examples of how introduction should start. Like we mentioned that we can start the story or a quote book the reader. Please give examples of each if possible. So let's just stop the screen sharing for a moment so that I have a better overview. And then I will get to your question. So an example. So for example, let's suppose that you are writing an article on the on child labor in a particular area of your country. Let's say if you're from India, you are writing on the pressing issue of child labor and how Islam prevents treating children like that and forcing them to do labor. And you want to really grasp the reader's attention. So you can start your introduction by narrating, once again in a very formal kind of way, the instance of a certain young boy that you might have read about in a newspaper, something that will really grab the attention of the reader, something they can relate to, something that they might have come across in the media already. So if you use those kind of examples or stories or things that might have got viral on social media or in the news that precisely relate to the topic that you are going to talk about, then those examples or those news stories presented in a very professional manner, of course, not an informal one, they will instantly grab the attention of the reader because the reader will have something to relate to, something he has already written or something he has already read or heard about, and it will urge the reader to, want to read more, what the writer has to say about it. So that's the example of maybe a story. Or you can also open your academic essay with a quote from a certain scholar, or maybe in the case of if you're a student of Islamic knowledge, it's always a perfect way to open your introduction by a Quranic verse that specifically talks about the issue or the topic that you have been instructed to write about, or maybe a narration, or maybe a statement from one of the Salaf. This is always a way to, very effectively open your introduction. So I also mentioned how the conclusion should be like, and how about I give an example so that we can get a better view of what I meant. So basically, the conclusion once again reinforces all the statements and claims that you have made in your piece. So it perfectly binds together what you have been telling the reader, but in a more concise and in a more comprehensive kind of way. So a conclusion should not be more than, let's say, 5 or 6 sentences, maximum maybe 8 or 9, like a small paragraph. Everything that has come in your article already should be repeated, but in a very precise manner and with different wording, so that it's not the same per se. If you read through it, it's not like you're reading a repeated section from your paper, but what you are reading is actually reaffirming and reconfirming whatever you have already substantiated in your assignment or in your article. Sometimes your conclusion can also conclude or have 1 or 2 sentences with recommendations, what should be done on a certain issue, what the need of the hour is, what actually you got from the piece, maybe a concluding thought, maybe a concluding remark that really seals the deal and convinces the reader to, really take the matter seriously and, do further reading and get to know more about a certain maybe social issue or something. So this is how your conclusion should be. It should not leave any doubt, but it should give the reader inspiration and motivation to, get more information from other sources as well. So this is how a good conclusion should be. Of course, it should still be very academic and professional, not personal, not sentimental, not sympathetic or something, because that is what an informal piece of writing is. That is the kind of language you would use in a magazine or on a blog or on a health and lifestyle website or in a newspaper. So articles, academic articles and professional articles are very much different from articles in a newspaper. So you have to keep that in mind. And how you differentiate those two writings are exactly keeping in mind the academic conventions, the do's and don'ts that we all went through in this lecture. So if there are any more questions, I would be happy to answer them. All the viewers can also get a sample of citation or maybe a list of useful resources to effectively manage your sources and manage your citations, as well as maybe an introductory handout on the APA style of referencing. I will provide those materials to the admin of the YouTube channel, and those sources may be uploaded on whatever social media you are following, inshallah. So that concludes the session. You can also leave your comments and feedback. You can also request materials relating to the issue of academic writing or research writing. You can also contact the admin of the Islamic Reflections channel if you want my personal email or contact for one-on-one sessions or for a more detailed overview or a detailed explanation of any one of the sections or a particular type of writing, because this live stream, given the fact that we only had an hour to cover all of these things and 30 minutes for a Q&A, as the topic itself said that it is just a crash course, it's just the tip of the iceberg. It is just to give you an overview of what it entails and all the things that come under the umbrella of it. Of course, if you take each of these things and take lots of examples to, really dive into. You could give a separate lecture on each of these subheadings and each of these things that we talked about in this comprehensive lecture. So if anyone wants to know more, please contact the admin of the Islamic Reflections channel, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share it with your fellow students, with your fellow professionals, with family members and friends. And I hope that you all benefited from the lecture. And I hope that if you were a beginner, you have at least some knowledge of what academic writing is about. If you were an intermediate, you have more knowledge than you had before. And if you are professional, and even if you are a very good writer, that maybe some concepts that you have long forgotten might have been refreshed, and they have been re-explained, and you can focus on them anew and instill all those qualities into your writing and create professional looking and professionally up to the mark documents, assignments, review articles, research articles, proposals, thesis, even papers, whatever it is that you are passionate about. And if there are no further questions, then I hope that wherever you are, if you are in the Asian continent, then I wish you all a good night or a good evening. If you are in the European continent, then yeah, you're probably in the late afternoon somewhere. If it's already night somewhere, then I wish you a good night. And if there is more, if you are in any corner of the world and it is just morning and you're beginning a new day, I hope that the day is full of blessings and full of good and positive things to happen to you, inshallah. So remember me in your prayers. Remember all of the students of knowledge in your prayers. Keep sharing the goodness, and subscribe to the channel. Urge others to subscribe. Share the lecture, share any resources that you might come across through Islamic Reflections. I thank the admin of Islamic Reflections for hosting this live session and allowing me this time to try and share some of the knowledge that I have with you guys. And I hope that we might meet another time, maybe in another session, maybe something other to talk about, inshallah. And till then, Jazakallah khairan for taking out the time to listen. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.